This is the first in a series of commentaries on the present age, a COVID-covered world, which appears soon to be destined for annihilation. Several signs appearing in societies and biological systems suggest that the climax of this present age is drawing ever nearer. Like the birth pangs of a woman's hard labor, just before her child breaks through the barrier of the womb and enters a new world, the convulsions of pain and tribulation appearing in societies around the world signify many unmistakable contractions. Economies, civil and human rights, freedoms, modes of travel and consumption, ranges of movement for humans, and offerings of work are all in contraction and bringing about a new order. The present one dying, and the one to come, a kingdom imperishable. The aim in this series is to apply principles of social and biosemiotics to analysis of what appear to be clear eschatological signs of the culmination of this age in the approaching kingdom that is coming upon the earth, just as it was referenced in that famous prayer given 2,000 years ago by Yeshua to his flock. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Those two lines serve, I would argue, as a stark reminder today that the will of God will certainly be carried out over all prevailing forms of evil, laying siege to the world, to human beings as creatures made in the image of the Most High, to our sovereign rights as a gift of God, and to the biosphere made by the eternal Word, who, in the beginning, spoke all seen and unseen things into existence. My own interest in signs, the corresponding concepts they signify in the mind, and how the mind organizes and makes sense of the world's complex phenomena through mental categories, began in the late 1980s after my graduation from university and entrance into the regular army. Recruited for work as an imagery analyst, I was trained in the basic principles of semiotic analysis. Every enemy weapon system, vehicle, line of communication, command and control, order of battle on land, sea, and air, war-making facility, and industrial infrastructure was subject to study through a multiplicity of visual imaging platforms. So the signifiers of enemy deception, of movement and camouflage, of false operations, simulations, and wargaming were all elemental to our work. Of course, visual information is only one aspect of the intelligence picture that comes into focus from analysis of other forms of data. But seeing, as they say, brings us even closer to believing. There's an interesting exchange between the religious authorities preserving and defending Israel's laws, and Yeshua reminding them of its weightier matters, which are justice, mercy, and faith. He called out their hypocrisy and vacuous traditions. Quote, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." Unquote. When the religious leaders trolled him and tried to paint him as a rebel, flouting the temple's vaunted traditions, established for cleanliness through ritual hand-washing, Yeshua rebuffed their hypocrisy. Quote, "Can you not see that whatever goes into the mouth passes into the stomach, and it's eliminated? Anything that proceeds from the mouth, however, proceeds from the heart, and it defiles the man. For out of the heart come evil thoughts and conspiracies." murders, adulteries, sexual immoralities, thievery, false testimonies,
and they're safe and they're highly effective. And they're safe and they're highly effective. And they're safe and they're highly effective.
slander, verbal abuse,
It is ma'am. You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
blasphemies. These are the things which defile and dishonor the man. But eating with ceremonially unwashed hands does not defile the man." Unquote. The true temple, he later went on to clarify, is not made by human hands, but rather by the eternal Word. The body is the temple, and therein dwells the Holy Spirit. The sign foreshadowed in Genesis 1:26-27, where we find that God created humanity to dwell with him and to bear his image to the world. For a time in history, after the fall, there was a need for a temple structure, which would serve as a sign to all nations that the Spirit of the Lord abides with a people chosen to communicate the Creator's message to his creation. The temple was the singular site wherein the presence and power of Adonai entered to dwell for a time with a high priest seeking to atone for the nation. The presence and power of the present age of global capital, however, moving and shaking the markets and societies of the world, can be found in other gleaming signifiers of worldly wealth. Maybe the most recognized sign on earth is the golden arches. And this sign, like so many fast food icons, evokes a multitude of mental images in people, as well as emotions. I still have vivid memories of my first trip to Mickey D's as a 4-year-old. My mom, always too busy to play with me, took some time one Saturday morning to walk me through a park that led to a shopping area in which stood a McDonald's burger stand. I was curious about it and pointed to it with excitement every time we passed, but here she was, finally leading me to the bright yellow arches, the green slab cement foundation upon which it stood, the bright white and red tiled color scheme, circus-like on the building, the smell of sizzling grease on the griddle, salt air, and the taste of the vanilla milkshake are seared into my memory. Today, although the iconic yellow sign may trigger in our minds some images of juicy quarter pounders and golden fries, icy shakes, sundaes, and apple pies, it will likely not elicit images of obesity, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, or high blood pressure. Such are some of the bodily effects in those subsisting on a steady diet of fast food. It's often the positive social signs we tend to associate with fast food that permeate the mass media we consume with our eyes, and so we must dig a bit more deeply to see what other deceptions might be at work as we consume not just the products served up hot and fast, but the ideas, ideologies, and policies that dominate contemporary mainstream media. So the aim in this series is to widen the critical lens, to gain a more comprehensive view of the present age by asking how the ancient prophecies offered throughout the scriptures illuminate the darkness of the present, and bring into relief the cryptic designs of men, mesmerized by the false promises of worldly gain, by their own depraved calculations, and their desire to deceive and capture and control all natural and synthetic sources of value for their personal pleasure and use. If we are to acquire a better understanding of what's really going on behind closed doors in the halls of power, we must begin by granting that something deeply disturbing is at work in the hearts and minds of men in power. The disturbance can be located in the words, actions, and proclamations of leaders and their spineless supplicants in nations around the world. Many observers in the community of believers worldwide wonder if the contemporary lockstep march toward global technocratic tyranny will collapse from its own exhaustion, or pale in fear and mourning by the return of the Messiah. The present world is so patently absurd that even atheists are now wrestling for some recognizable logic behind the madness. Can it really be that in unseen realms, the powers and principalities of darkness are holding sway over the minds of world leaders, inspired to capture and subjugate their own people? The conspiracy seems too sophisticated, and the big lie much too enormous to be concealed, and yet there it is, despotism spreading like turbo cancer. Can the sages of old speak to the present and tell us where we might be on the prophetic course of history? Sooner or later, the lies of men in love with money and power are always exposed, for a lie contains the seeds of its own demise. Each fabricated falsehood requires another to conceal it, ad nauseum, until the weight of the unsound structure crumbles. Since the material world is moving naturally in the direction of disintegration, no man can conceal his offenses forever. Guarded by a legion of lies, will the hollow promises of a man-made utopia fall into ruin before revelation is fully realized before our very eyes. Yeshua provides us with insights. Quote, "The light of a lamp shall not shine in you anymore, and the voice of bridegroom and bride shall not be heard in you anymore. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, for by your sorceries all the nations were deceived." For us curious observers today, the signs of an emerging picture of the present age might help us ascertain the identity of quote-unquote your. Whose quote-unquote merchants, by the way, and whose quote-unquote sorceries carry out on nations such deceptions mentioned by Yeshua. When John saw the details in this vision on Patmos, he used the expression Mystery Babylon to try to capture an image of a future empire that probably seemed to him to span many boundaries, symbolized by waters. If we consider today's central banking system, a transnational entity with allegiance to no nation, which dominates the entire globe, the plutocrats and politicians, those kings, who frequent the World Economic Forum in league with, indeed in agreement with, the UN and the WHO, then the perplexing form of an empire John described probably seemed, from his first century perspective, to cross many waters. The shape of a future mysterious Babylon. Are these the merchants described as the quote-unquote great men of earth who deceive the nations by their sorceries? In his vision, John noted that this empire was like a harlot who, having no fidelity to any nation, quote-unquote rides, that is, controls or commands the beast for a short time, likely the 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation. Is it any wonder why so many people see in their leaders well-heeled prostitutes to the centers of global power? If the interpretation is accurate, your, quote-unquote, may refer to Mystery Babylon, that harlot secretly despised by the beast of Revelation 13, who at some point destroys her. Consider for a moment the past few years, and the seething abhorrence that certain public figures, pushing their pharmaceutical remedies, have invited upon themselves. Plans to dim the light of the sun, to prop up the absurd fictions of global warming, to reduce humanity to a carbon footprint, to turn ticks and mosquitoes into self-propelled delivery vehicles of vaccines, to bring all plant and animal life into the factory for genetic manipulation, culturing and production for human sustenance. These all engender outrage in the masses and joy in the investment class, the stakeholders of the new global order of business. If we further consider today the well-funded, state-sanctioned erasure of male and female as distinct categories of human reproduction, it is curious that explicit references to bridegroom and bride should also appear in the vision given to John. Besides the ancient metropolis of Sodom and Gomorrah, vaporized by a Tunguska-sized airburst, have there ever been other cities throughout history so well situated for a divine intervention? If a new crisis, foreshadowed by, say, Cyber Polygon, brings down the power grids of Mystery Babylon, and wedding bells no longer sound for bridegroom, men, and bride, women, because they will, by then, have been so psychologically abused, profoundly confused, and fully dispossessed of their reproductive powers, given their long exposure to a cornucopia of chemical and genetic adulterations they submit to or are subjected to by environmental toxins, radiation, pesticides, assorted endocrine disruptors, and regimes of mandated vaccines. Will we finally awaken to recognize what we are seeing? For the quote-unquote great men, the rulers, commanders, the captains of industry, will govern by deceiving the nations through their sorcery, that is, pharmacy. Revelation 18:23 may also allude to the way in which these merchants will have captured political institutions through the invention of the petroleum industry and the subsequent development of the petroleum-based pharmaceutical industry, as well as the petrochemical and bioweapons industry for dominance over energy, agriculture, food refinement and production, and other fields and battlefields where economic competition and aggression play out. Christine Lagarde, the head of the European Central Bank, has recently noted that climate change is responsible for inflation, so the quote-unquote merchants of this age need to block out the sun. They are banking, seems to me, on the public's blind faith in the central banking system, now working hard to replace fiat currency with digital tokens, programmable to our level of obedience and our general inability to recognize that intrinsic value for tokens of trade is derived from human beings. Because the masses are so unpredictable, the quote-unquote great men of Earth have devised 17 so-called Sustainable Development Goals, i.e., methods of increasing predictability, to surmount all the problems their investment and production activities have created since the Industrial Revolution largely subsumed the agrarian age. In the next episode, I will dig more deeply into the technocratic convergence of humans and machines, and what now appears to be an obvious foreshadowing of the present. Until then, may the eternal light drive from our hearts every form of darkness. Adonai be glorified.